Hi there. I think we'll just give it a couple minutes for folks to join. Okay, I think we have everyone. We have a couple of folks who weren't able to join us today, but they will go ahead and watch the recording. Wanted to just welcome everybody. And let's see, we have, just want to double check on the staff side. We have Ken, Paul, Angela. Fantastic, okay. And they'll come on camera when they're introducing themselves. 1 second, I can pull up our agenda. I know everyone is incredibly busy, so I wanted to thank each of you for participating. I want to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And let's see, just want to make sure no one's missing. Yeah, let me go ahead and have the staff join us. It's not that many people, so if we can have staff on camera, that'd be helpful. I know some folks may not know everyone. So here we are. And then Paul, if you can't, not to worry. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And then the screen that says City of Hermosa Beach, that is Ann Yang from the City Manager's Office. So she will help us with this meeting with some of the technical pieces of the meeting. And so don't want you to think that there's another body there. There's also council chambers. That is a square on the screen that you see. That is if anyone comes in person to provide public comment at the end of the meeting, we'll open up that camera and then you'll see council chambers go live into our chambers. And so those are the two extra screens you see. Just want to be sure that you have that. So I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And I had shared this, but I just wanted to go over it again. Before we continue, I wanted to let everyone know that there will be public participation period toward the end of this meeting. And if you would like to speak during our meeting or provide feedback, I think you're all familiar with the raise your virtual hand feature to Zoom. And when you do that, you'll be placed in queue, and then Anne from our office can see who's queued up. And then this way it's a little bit easier to manage with a larger group. And folks, for those of you who are joining us from the public, if you are participating by phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. We will end public participation period at 7:30 p.m. to allow some time for the advisory group members to have their questions addressed and make some comments. If you do not get an opportunity, and this is for members of the public, if you do not get an opportunity to speak this evening, you may submit written communication at any time or speak at one of the future meetings. If you are joining us by Zoom, and again, this is for members of the public, and if you have not done so previously during a council meeting, again, just use your virtual hand and raise your virtual hand, and then you'll be placed in queue. With that, if I can turn it over to Anne to do roll call.
Thank you, Suja. We'll start with Russ Gilbert.
I'm here.
Nathan Tribble.
I'm here.
Heidi Swan.
Here.
Cami Herbert.
Here.
Andrea Valcourt.
Here.
Tom Beckley.
Here.
Dave Davis.
Here.
Chief LeBaron.
Here.
Director Robertson.
Ken?
I am here. Sorry.
Deputy City Manager Angela Crespi. And Madam City Manager.
Here.
And we're just noting the absence of Dr. Jason Johnson and Mr. Matt Cottrell.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. And we'll make sure that they have the link to the meeting so that they can review the meeting when they're able to. And just to reintroduce myself, I am Suja Lowenthal, City Manager here in Hermosa Beach, and you have Angela Crespi, Deputy City Manager, Ken Robertson, Community Development Director, and Paul LeBaron, Chief of Police, joining us. We also have our City Attorney, Mike Jenkins, who is here, and Mike will provide a presentation in just a little bit. What I wanted to also touch on before we get started is a couple of things. One is, first of all, thank you. Thank you again. It's a lot of time from all of your busy schedules. And so I do recognize how important it is to have community feedback and community participation, but I don't underestimate how much time you all dedicate to civic engagement. And I know some of this cuts into your workday. And so for that, I'm thankful and grateful, and really I'm looking forward to this advisory group deliberating and making its recommendations. What I wanted to share with you is, because this is a process where either you will decide to make recommendations based on consensus basis, and we'll discuss the decision-making structure. I'm hoping that you will be able to refrain from commenting either publicly or on social media outside of this venue. So these are very public meetings. And so of course you are welcome to comment publicly here. I think just as the council wants to reserve any decisions being made until all deliberation take place, I'm hoping that we can have this group follow that same format. And when you do comment in public, I think if you can hold back from sharing your what your positions may be, if you have them, of course, during this process, we asked each of you where you are on the question of retail cannabis. And so you were very honest and you shared that. And so that, of course, is absolutely great. I think in having open discussions about very specific aspects of it, it might help to have those with your colleagues here amongst the advisory group members so that everyone can have the benefit of that. Not everyone is on social media equally. And so for those who are, they have access to these comments quickly. And for those who aren't, I think they don't. And so in order to be sure that everyone has the benefit of your point of view and feedback in this group, I'm hoping that you can have those discussions here. And if that's agreeable to you, great. If you feel otherwise, of course, you're free to do as you wish. And I'm just sharing that as a recommendation and really an observation from having been involved in these processes before. In terms of decision-making, I do have a question before you, and you don't have to decide at this time, but perhaps you can go ahead and consider it. And after this, I'd like to go back around and have everyone do self-introductions and also share what 1 or 2 goals you may have for this advisory group, for your participation and for the outcomes, really. So whatever you'd like to share, and we'll notate that. I want to be sure I am tracking that so that we stay focused on the goals that you raised, and at any time when we need to check back in, we can. And so I think that helps guide these meetings. So from a decision-making standpoint, in order to promote the timely participation and completion of the committee's tasks, and we have a short time frame, that's why we're meeting weekly, it's recommended that all materials and decision-making be covered within the meetings, as opposed to a model that would require consideration and deliberation outside of the meetings for the members. So 2 structures you could consider. One is consensus-based decisions, where the specific language of the recommendation would be unanimously agreed upon by the entire group. You know, there are pros and cons to that. One of the pros could be that it compels a unanimous decision on each of the recommendations. It demonstrates a strong front in decision making. The cons to that is it can take considerable amount of time to deliberate and agree upon the specific language, and it wouldn't necessarily allow for the nuance of autonomy. So of course, there are pros and cons to everything, and there are more, of course. And the second model that you could consider is majority-based decisions. And this is where the committee would agree that a vote of the majority of the group would decide the final language of the recommendations, the set of recommendations. And here, just in contrast to consensus-based, it's a more timely approach to decision-making, would allow for certain members to participate in the recommendations, but ultimately you could maintain a personal individual position outside of the group. The cons to that, of course, is there's a potential for less of a united front. And again, there are thoughts around both of those. And so if you could just think that over, and we'll go into introducing everyone and sharing what our goals are. And perhaps we can either have a discussion about the decision-making structure after the introductions, or we can do it at the end of this first meeting. So have a little bit more time to marinate over what style you think would be better for you and for the outcomes of this group. Is that good so far for everyone? I hope. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so if I could just maybe call on folks as I see you on the screen, that might make it easier and less of an awkward silence in between introductions, if that's okay. The first person I see is Andrea, and is it Andrea or Andrea? Let's see. Can you get off mute? I know it's always. I think it would. How about I switch over to Russ first, and then Andrea, just let me know when you're ready. Russ, do you want to go next?
Sure. Of course, I have to go first. My name's Russ Gilbert. What's that?
I tried.
I know. My name's Russ Gilbert. I'm EVP of Digital, the digital marketing agency called New Voodoo. Lived in Hermosa Beach for the first time in 2009, left for a few years and then moved back about 4 years ago. Absolutely love it here and just want the absolute best for the people who live here and the city itself. And
do you have any goals for this group or your participation in this group? What are you hoping to get?
You know, my belief is that cannabis is probably going to be legalized federally at some point, and it would benefit everybody to get ahead of that. There's going to be issues that come with it that we want to learn about and make sure that we do everything possible to mitigate. And that's basically it. I'm not a habitual user and never really have been, so I don't have a horse in the race that much. But I do care what happens to the neighborhood and the people who live here.
Terrific, thank you. Let's see, Andrea, are you able to unmute? No? Okay, Are you on a Mac or a PC? Mac or no? PC? Okay. Maybe Anne can work with you. And if you can either ring and, oh, it looks like you're off mute. There you are.
Hey, I don't know, my cursor won't move, so sorry about that.
That's okay. I was going to say the space bar is usually what we hit for mute on a PC, but for muting and unmuting, but however you did it, you're perfect. You can just leave it off mute just to be sure. Do you want to introduce?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Andrea Valcourt, and I've lived in Hermosa for about 21 years. And while I haven't been participating very much in the last couple of years, I have been on other city committees. It got me started when we had the no on O for oil drilling. And then I participated in some other committees. So I'm happy to be back in the fold, so to speak, and being able to work with people in the city again, recognize some familiar faces. And I told a friend of mine that I was on this committee, and they laughed because of all the people in our group and in my family. I'm pretty much the straight and narrow, don't use anything. So I have no preconceived notions. I think that if people want to use cannabis, that's their prerogative. But I do want it to be sold in a controlled way. And I'm curious to know how the initiative is in line with our municipal code. And also to get clarification on some of the points in the initiative, because it looked like it was in some way geared toward the company that's promoting this initiative. So I'd like to get clarity on that so that I can make an informed decision on should we go forward or not.
Perfect. Thank you. That's the other thing you can share also either at this time or at any time during our meetings is what questions you have and what questions you'd like to answer, especially since we have our city attorney and other department heads and senior team members here that could help with that. So thank you for that. Cami?
Hi, Cami Herbert. I've just been informally on various committees. I've lived here 23 years, and raised and still raising family. My biggest thing was I was just the South Park. There was 4 of us doing South Park. So I know long and tedious processes, but necessary to get everybody's input. So sorry, I have to look at my notes because I'm nervous. I don't do Zoom very often. I'm not a big tech person. So personally, kind of a goal is just that I understand everybody's view and what's the concerns and what's the objections, so that we can give the city kind of really bigger goal that we're given fact-filled assessments to, because I think we've all got to scrutinize the info we receive to balance. For me, it's balance. Well, it's not just for me. I think it should be for the group as a goal that we're balancing the quality of life with the consequences to the city. So quality of life for majority of the people and consequences, good or bad, to the city. There's always that balance because we're all very small. So everything can't come in, and everything doesn't get to just come in however they want to come in. Whatever it is, I don't think it's specific to cannabis.
Perfect. I think I met you my first public, it was the reception we had at the small pizza place.
Yes.
And so you introduced yourself and gave me a briefing on South Park Moms. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining us. Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Davis. I own Hermosa Brewing Company. I'm also recently became the chairman of the board for the Chamber of Commerce here in Hermosa. So I'm also a resident, so a resident, business owner, and the chair of the chamber. So kind of representing a few different positions here. And I've been in Hermosa for, it's been about 6 years now, but in the South Bay for about 22 years, 23 years. And, from the chamber perspective, we don't really have a position, and we're just gathering information and trying to represent our chamber members here in this forum. And obviously, as a business owner that runs a highly scrutinized and regulated business with alcohol sales, it in some ways relates to the potentially incoming cannabis industry. And I just want to make sure that whatever guidelines, rules, regulations, and especially the ability to enforce those, is put into place for the protection of the community and the residents. I don't have I'm not a cannabis user. I'm not saying I haven't back in the day, but it's not something that's a regular thing for me. So but I don't really, if something's legal, it's legal, and we just have to learn how to integrate it into our city if we choose so. And we just have to do that with a firm set of rules and guidelines and regulations. And so I'm just looking to see if we can establish that and hopefully make a recommendation to the city.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Tom?
Hi, everybody. I know many of you. My name's Tom Backley. I'm the CEO of the Beach Cities Health District. I'm a Hermosa resident and former city manager of Hermosa Beach. So hearing about oil in South Park is bringing back old memories. So it's good to be with you all tonight. And as far as goals that I have, I really hope that we're able to engage the youth in this discussion and young people. In reading the petition, I see that they're not mentioned, but residents are mentioned. They're obviously residents, and so I hope we're able to engage that group. And then a second goal, somewhat related, would be that we have a robust discussion around accessibility and acceptability and how those two kind of go together when we talk about this potential use in our town.
Thank you, Tom. Nathan?
Hi, good evening. My name's Nathan Tribble. I'm the president of Stockpile Investments, a financial services firm based out of Silicon Valley. I previously have some experience on the broader and arguably more contentious topic of cannabis legalization when I was responsible for research for Morgan Stanley, covering the Oakland City decision to legalize cannabis. As far as my goals for this committee and this process, I actually don't think I have goals that are related to an outcome, but more to a process, and that I'm committed to sort of hoping that whatever recommendations, if there are recommendations to the broader council, that they are data-driven and rigorous and rely on sort of more critical insights and less on kind of the emotional appeals, because we know that that's something that will be prevalent in any public comment or approaches.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. Heidi?
Hi, I'm Heidi Anderson Swan, and I've been a resident of Hermosa Beach for 22 years. We own our condo. This is great. I'm an advocate and an author, and I talk mostly about marijuana and its link to mental illness. And that's what brought me to this advisory group, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. And like Tom was saying, accessibility is acceptability. And that's a real danger here, especially because in the last 6 years, the marijuana industry has changed in a way that none of us could have even perceived would happen. And the products they are making are unimaginable. And so I really want to be sure that the advisory group is up to speed on them. What are the high potency products? What are the different kinds? What are their effects? Because they can be very damaging to the brain and to the body. And when we're talking about, who has accessibility to it, think of an 18-year-old. This is a young adult who can't buy beer, can't buy cigarettes, but can get a medical marijuana card online for pretty much any reason, and then go into a shop and buy a ton of product, of ultra high potency marijuana product. And now the brain doesn't stop developing until the age of 26. And so the damage to the brain is, it's just so harmful, and it can be irreversible. And we really must protect our kids, because if this high school student can get their hands on high potency product and a whole bunch of it, what do they do with the excess? This is one way that they can turn around and sell to younger people. And that's one way that the legal market gets turned over to younger kids who should never have their hands on it. And so I would just say no high potency products, none in Hermosa Beach. And that would be one of the big goals of mine. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. And I know we said that Matt was not joining us today, but Matt is here. Matt, we're just doing introductions. Do you want to introduce yourself and perhaps share what goals you may have for this group and your participation in the group?
Hi, guys. Yeah, my apologies. I'm going to sit in on this. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to add too much today. It's my birthday, and I've got my whole family in town, and it's a big one. It's my 50th. So we're all heading out. But I spent the last 8 years in both medical and adult use markets in Arizona and Oregon. And intentionally, I was not involved in the California markets for my own reasons. I've been a longtime resident of Hermosa Beach, and my goals with this are to see that that Hermosa Beach doesn't have to encounter the missteps that many other cities have encountered and many other municipalities. I've been able to witness going from medical markets into recreational markets, which California has just done. I think it's debatable as to whether or not that has been successful. And I have a lot to add to that discussion from experience. And so really for me, it's about helping my community, helping them roll out and do it the right way. Also to avoid the panic. And I see this everywhere. People make statements as though they're truth, and there's not the data to back it up. I'm a very data-driven person. I've got experience with law enforcement, with city managers. I mean, so much that I would like to lend to this conversation so that people can understand what other municipalities have faced. And so really to help us, I don't want us to skip the steps. I want us to experience them, but maybe we don't have to have all those pain points and make them the mistakes that other municipalities have made.
Terrific. Thank you for joining us, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then whenever you need to leave, just
I'm probably just going to mute and stop the video, and I'll continue. And I'd love to listen.
Yeah. No. And then this is, you'll have a link to follow back up and review that, so you won't miss anything.
Great. Thank you so much.
Terrific.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. I think it says a lot about Hermosa Beach that so many people have jumped into this. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, of course. Wanted to also just quickly go through our staff team that's here before we turn it over to our city attorney. And if I can start with Ken, we'll let you know what our department does and how our departments are would be involved with a cannabis question, whether there is retail, non-retail, or any issue related to cannabis. So I'll start with Ken.
Hello, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ken Robertson. I'm the director of the Community Development Department. I've been working with the city for over 30 years. So what I hope to bring to the table is just to help inform all of you, make the best, best recommendation possible, given my expertise and kind of understanding our regulations with respect to how businesses are regulated in different parts of the city, as well as I was deeply involved in the adoption of Plan Hermosa, so that could be have relevant information as to how it relates to this question. So I just hope to be a valuable part of helping all of you make good recommendations with respect to those types of issues. So that's my focus, and I'm glad to be of help.
Perfect, thank you. Paul?
Good evening, everybody. Paul LeBaron, I'm the Chief of Police with the Hermosa Beach Police Department. I know many of you, so it's nice to see you. And my goal is to make sure that the police department is here to provide you with information that might be helpful in your decisions. I'm very much aware of Matt's comments that there's many times a lack of data, and I can tell you that we do the best we can to gather data, but sometimes the anecdotal is also asked for, and I'll do my very best to make sure that I provide the best context I can for everything. I've got 29 years of police service at this point. I spent my first 27 years with the Long Beach Police Department, and that city went through a very similar experience as to what we might be going through here in the future. And I was tasked with overseeing a lot of the integration of dispensaries and the cannabis businesses and the operations that were coming in. So I do have some experience in the seat, so to speak, and I'll be more than happy to help however I can. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Perfect, thank you. Angela?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Crespi. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I've been with the city coming up on 1 year now. So my role with the city is to assist the city manager in carrying out the policy directives and priorities of the city council, and also to assist the city manager and the departments with operations and cross-department projects and issues. This being one of those, it touches on a number of departments here. So I'm just here to help our city manager and our departments shepherd this question through to the city council and just be of assistance any way that I can. So it's nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. A couple of things. I misspoke when I said that people would be able to come in person in the chambers. Actually, this is an all virtual meeting, so all of the public participation will be virtual. And before jumping over to our city attorney, Mike Jenkins, I wanted to call on Angela to go over the work plan that we have, which I think you've seen. So she'll just go over it briefly, and then we'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. So following the City Council directive to the City Manager at its December 14th, 2021 meeting, staff developed a work plan for the to-be-formed Cannabis Advisory Group, yourselves. The intent of developing the work plan was to provide guidelines and a path for how this group will work towards reaching the outcomes requested by the City Council, which was essentially to explore policy issues and provide input on whether the city's current ban on cannabis business operations should be modified. So the work plan that we developed further incorporates details of the directives that were provided by City Council, including that the group will adhere to the Brown Act, meaning that its meetings like this will be open to the public, that members shall represent public safety, the health district, the school district, our businesses, and members of the community at large, and that all efforts would be made to ensure that representation is evenly balanced. The final work plan also outlines the broad questions that the group will explore as we work toward providing the input requested by council. So the work plan in its entirety is available on the city's website. We have created an individual page for the Cannabis Advisory Group where we place the work plan and some frequently asked questions for folks. So I invite everyone to look at the work plan in its entirety. And we will use that as we move forward in this group to make sure that we're staying on track with the directives provided by council.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Does anyone have any questions so far? Before I turn it over to Mike Jenkins, I know we've just gotten started, but just want to make sure that you have any questions on the work plan. What I also wanted to share is that if you have recommendations on subject matter experts, please feel free to share that with us. We will, over the next several meetings, bring on guest speakers. And during that time also, or during any time that you want to provide feedback on a topic that might be the topic of the meeting, and you'd like to share your screen, just let us know and we'd be happy to help accommodate that. And with screen sharing as part of your remarks or feedback to any particular issue discussed, we just want to make sure that it doesn't end up dominating the conversation. This is a group meeting and we want to be sure that we allow for as robust an opportunity as possible for everyone to speak and have their questions answered. And so when we do open up the opportunity for screen sharing, I just want to make sure that we're mindful that we're not overtaking that portion of the meeting, but really just perhaps trying to illustrate what we want to share with our voice, sharing it by screen. So we can definitely make that option available to you. Just let us know. So if there aren't any questions, Mike, would you be okay to start?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Jenkins. I'm the Hermosa Beach City Attorney. Seems like some of you may have more knowledge, more information about the subject of cannabis than others. What I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of where things stand at the moment. For some of you, this may be old hat, and if so, I apologize if you find this tedious. And for some of you, you may be learning some things for the first time. And then when I'm done, I'll field questions. But this will not be the only opportunity for you to ask questions. You'll have other opportunities going forward to do that. In 2016, California voters approved Proposition 64. And Proposition 64 was a statewide initiative known as the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act, otherwise known as AUMA. The AUMA created a complex regulatory and licensing scheme for commercial cannabis activities in the state of California from basically what they call seed to sale. This law basically allowed for the decriminalization of cannabis in California and allowed for the commercial sale of cannabis without criminal penalty, basically. The AUMA was subsequently clarified through an additional state law adopted a year later in 2017 called the Medical and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. I would say right now up front that the state law regulating cannabis is very complicated. It is lengthy and complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it for you as best I can by saying this. With regard to local cities like Hermosa Beach, cities have the option of banning all commercial cannabis activity if they choose to. They have the option to allow some or all commercial cannabis activity subject to permitting and regulation. It is an entirely local option. Okay? The one thing that cities cannot do is they cannot criminalize the possession of cannabis for personal use by any individual, and they must allow any individual to cultivate no more than 6 plants in their home for personal use. Okay. Otherwise, basically persons age 21 or over in California may possess and use cannabis products for their personal use without fear of any criminal prosecution. I would note parenthetically that cannabis is a controlled substance, a Schedule I drug within the meaning of the United States Federal Controlled Substances Act, meaning that cannabis and cannabis products are illegal under federal law. That said, the federal government has not been actively enforcing the Federal Controlled Substances Act in those states like California, Colorado, and others that have decriminalized the use of cannabis and cannabis products. The state cannabis law, AUMA, imposes a state tax on the commercial cultivation and sale of both medicinal and non-medicinal cannabis. It also establishes minimum distancing or radius requirements with regard to the commercial retail sale of cannabis products. Basically, that radius is 600 feet from a school providing K through 12 education, 600 feet from a daycare center, and 600 feet from a youth center. Okay? In a nutshell, that's your state law, that's your federal law. Let's talk for a moment about Hermosa Beach law. City of Hermosa Beach ordinance pertaining to cannabis is found in the Municipal Code section 17.42.110. When the AUMA was enacted, the City Council here in Hermosa Beach passed an ordinance prohibiting all commercial cannabis activity in the city. So today, commercial cannabis activity of all kinds is prohibited in the city of Hermosa Beach. This ban is permitted by the AUMA. It is an option, as I mentioned before. Cities have the option of banning it entirely or allowing it subject to regulation. Hermosa Beach elected to ban it. And so if you take a look at Municipal Code section 17.42.110, it is a relatively short and concise section that makes it clear that all commercial cannabis activity is prohibited in Hermosa Beach. That means no retail sales, no deliveries into Hermosa Beach, although I would also note that that particular prohibition is very difficult to enforce, simply because we just don't have the capability of keeping track of what kinds of products are being delivered to individual residences within the city. So this section of the municipal code is short, clear, and absolute. All right, so what about the initiative? The initiative process is enshrined in the California Constitution. The initiative process works at both the statewide level and at the local level. As I mentioned earlier, Prop 64, the statewide initiative that allows for the decriminalization of cannabis, was, as noted, a statewide initiative. The initiative that has been presented to the city of Hermosa Beach is a local initiative, but it's very similar. What is the initiative process? It's a process that reserves to the people the opportunity to make law. Basically, the Constitution reserves to the people the ability to create law. Even though we are a representative democracy, if the people's representatives, in this case the city council, do not choose to enact a law, the people can take it into their own hands and enact a law without regard to the city council. And that's how an initiative works. A proponent prepares an ordinance and then is entitled to circulate it in the community and to obtain the signatures of not less than 10% of the registered voters of the community. And if the circulator succeeds in doing that, the circulator or the proponent would then submit that petition to the city clerk. The city clerk is charged with counting the signatures to make sure that there are enough signatures to qualify, that is to say, at least 10% of the registered voters of the city. And if there are, then the city clerk reports to the city council that the petition has qualified. And then the city council will have its options. And I will get into those in a moment. This particular initiative would basically overturn Hermosa Beach's ban on commercial cannabis activity to the extent that it would affirmatively allow no fewer than 2 commercial retail storefront operations in the city of Hermosa Beach where cannabis could be sold to the public. The initiative establishes radius requirements, that is distancing requirements, that are actually stricter than state law. You'll recall a few moments ago I said that state law had a 600-foot distancing requirement from schools, daycare centers, and youth centers. This initiative actually is stricter than the state law. It has a 600-foot distancing requirement from daycare centers, but then it has a greater distancing requirement from youth centers. It has 1,000 feet from any school, 1,500 feet from Clark Stadium and the Hermosa Beach Community Center. It also only allows for cannabis retail operations in the C3 zone and the SPA 7 zone. Ken's department prepared a map which showed that basically when you take into consideration the distancing requirements and the fact that the 2 potential retail operations would only be permitted in the C3 zone and the SPA 7 zone, there are basically 2 small areas in the city where cannabis operation would be permitted. One on PCH in the northernmost part of the city near the Manhattan Beach border, and the second on PCH in the southernmost part of the city near the border with Redondo Beach. The initiative leaves to the city council the authority to determine whether other types of commercial cannabis operations, such as manufacturing sites, cultivation, distribution, and testing laboratories, are to be permitted in the city or not. But the one thing the initiative does do is it does not permit the city council to reduce from 2 the number of commercial cannabis retail storefront operations that would be permitted in the city. The initiative is very lengthy. It has a long set of definitions. It has a very extensive application process, criteria for the issuance of the 2 permits or licenses for the commercial storefront operation, criteria for the issuance of points by which the city manager would ultimately determine the two strongest applications, which would then be issued licenses to operate. The initiative does not provide for taxation above and beyond the state tax for cannabis operations. And so if the city were to want to impose a higher tax on commercial cannabis operations, which many cities have done, the city would have to ask the voters of Hermosa Beach to impose such a tax by way of a ballot measure. And the reason for that is that under Prop 13 and under Prop 218, no city may enact a new tax unless it is approved by the electorate. One of you asked whether or not the initiative ordinance is in some way slanted towards a particular cannabis operation. I don't have personal knowledge of that, but what I would say is that the criteria for obtaining a permit or a license in the city is such that only those commercial operators who have a track record of operations, who have a substantial amount of assets, and do have significant experience in other communities would essentially be eligible to obtain a license. And in that regard, it does preclude smaller operations, startup operations, and the similar from obtaining a permit. So you could certainly regard that as being slanted in some way towards certain operators. Others may be able to comment on this in the course of your meetings and your discussions with subject matter experts and others who you'll be speaking to and who will be appearing before you, who know more about this than I do. But clearly, I believe that there is a specific cannabis operator who is behind this particular petition and who has constructed the proposed ordinance in a way that favors their operation. I think that would be a fair conclusion, but that's merely my opinion, and I suggest that if that's an interest of yours, you can pursue it with others who are more knowledgeable about this than I am. I'm only ascertaining that from basically the face of the initiative ordinance itself, from what I read here. Okay, so let's talk about the city council's options. And Russ, I will answer questions as soon as I'm done with my presentation, which won't be very long. What are the options here? Well, when a petition, first, the petition has to qualify. That requires 1,400 signatures of elected voters in the city of Hermosa Beach. If for some reason the petition does not qualify, there are insufficient number of signatures, then it's over. It has no legal significance. It's dead. It doesn't go forward. So it has to receive the minimum number of signatures in order to qualify. If it does, then the city clerk must bring it to the city council. And it brings it to a city council at a meeting, an open meeting, where the clerk basically gives the council two options. Those options are to adopt the ordinance as is with no change whatsoever, or to place the ordinance on the ballot and let the voters decide. Now, there is one subsidiary option that the council has, and that is the council can delay making one of those two decisions for 30 days, during which time it can ask its staff to bring back a report on the impacts of the proposed ordinance. So the council has that option to ask for a 30-day delay, during which time staff will prepare and bring back to the city council a report on the initiative. But then when it comes back, the city council will have only those two options, either adopt it as is or place it on the ballot. When that time comes, that will determine which ballot it goes on. So if it comes to the city council for a decision before August, roughly August, somewhere between August 1st and August 10th, I'm not sure exactly what that date is, then it will be eligible for the general municipal election in November of this year. If it comes to the city council after roughly the first week or so of August, then it would be eligible for the ballot in November of 2024. So, obviously the proponents are motivated to get the petitions signed and submitted as early as they can, because the city clerk has to spend some time counting the signatures, and then it goes to the city council in the process I just described. Now, that tells you what the city council's options are relative to this particular petition. What other options are there out there? So I'm just going to give you an array of other options that are available. One is the city council could express its support for the initiative. So the city council could do that. City council could do that. Now, if the council supported the initiative, well, they could just adopt it. That's one of the two options, right? Adopt it as is or put it on the ballot. So they could adopt it, or they could put it on the ballot and they could decide, they could put it on the ballot because they want the voters to decide, because they want to get the sentiment of the community. And then they could support it if they chose to by simply expressing support. Or the city council could put it on the ballot and take a position of opposition to it. The city council could vote to oppose the measure. Or the council could offer an alternative ordinance, one that perhaps allows cannabis operations in a different way than this particular initiative ordinance. The council could either adopt an ordinance on its own before November, or the council could put an alternative ordinance on the ballot if it chose to do so. So that's an option. And then finally, regardless of what the council does or doesn't do with respect to the petition, the council will need to, if the petition qualifies, and if the council does what it's legally required to do and puts it on the ballot, the council will have to decide whether or not it wants to put a tax measure on the ballot at the same time. Because otherwise, if it doesn't, and the initiative passes, then the city will not receive any additional tax revenue from any cannabis operations that open up until and unless the council puts such a measure on the ballot. And if the council doesn't put the measure on the ballot at the same time as the measure, by way of example, November of 2022, then the council would have to wait 2 years until November of 2024 to put such a tax measure on the ballot. So you got some unusual circumstances here, and I'll just lay them out for you. Suppose the city council opposes the initiative. It could do that, and at the same time, it could also put a tax measure on. That might seem inconsistent, but it wouldn't be inconsistent, because the council would basically be saying, we're opposed to this, but if the people of Hermosa Beach pass it, we want to tax it, and we want to ask you, the people, to tax it. So it could be awkward in a sense, but there you go. When I say that the city council may take a position, what I mean is that the city council can take a vote at a council meeting, pass a resolution or otherwise a motion to take a position one way or another on the measure. And that's pretty much all the city can do. The city cannot spend public funds on campaigning or advocacy. That's not legal. So the city can provide educational material, can provide informational material in the course of an election campaign to let the people in the community, to give the people in the community information, to explain to them what it's all about. But the city cannot use public funds or public employees to advocate. So we cannot say, vote yes, vote no. The city council, of course, the city council members themselves can take whatever position they want, but we cannot expend any public money on advocacy. All right, I'm going to say just a couple of more things and then stop, and I'll conclude and then answer any questions. A couple of things. One, as Angela noted earlier, you are subject to the Brown Act. That means that all your meetings have to be open and public. That means that you cannot talk to a majority of the members of this body outside of the meeting. So my suggestion to you is, I've tried to figure out how many you are, not counting staff, you're 9. I think I'd rather not count staff and just say that you shouldn't talk to more than 3 others of this group outside of a meeting. When I say should, I should have said shall not talk to more than 3 others outside of a meeting. And frankly, I think it's probably better that you not talk to anybody outside of a meeting, that for the sake of transparency, have your deliberations and have your discussions here in these meetings. We've scheduled all these meetings for you. They're all open to the public, and people can watch them. And this is the best place to talk about this subject matter. But under the Brown Act, you cannot talk to more than 3 other people on this advisory group outside of a meeting.
Mike,
2 people.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mike, would you also cover the social media portion of it? So Mike is giving the much more firm version of what I've shared, but listen to him on this one. Would you share the social media aspect to Brown Act?
Yeah, I would beg you not to discuss the subject of this body on social media. The Brown Act was amended recently to address social media, and basically if any one of you were to make a comment about what you're doing here on social media, no other person can react to it. You cannot like it, you cannot react to it with a thumbs up, you can't address it without creating a potential Brown Act violation. So the rules are pretty strict when it comes to social media. And, I think you just have to think about it like this. You've been given an opportunity by the city to participate in this process and to be part of this advisory group. And it's an opportunity that is a good one for you. You have opinions, you have thoughts, you want to play a role in this process as part of the city government. So keep it here. Just for this limited period of months that you'll be on this advisory group, just avoid addressing this subject on social media, because it will prejudice your participation here and it will create a potential Brown Act violation. But if any one of you does comment on Facebook or wherever on the business of this body, then all of the rest of you should not respond. You should not react to it, or else you will potentially be violating the Brown Act. Someone from my office will be in attendance at your meetings to be available to answer questions as they may come up, unless we've determined it's just not necessary for a particular meeting. That person will either be Lauren Langer or Pat Donegan, both of whom have a lot of experience working in cities dealing with cannabis regulation. Lauren is the chair of the City Attorney's Department for the League of California Cities Cannabis Committee, and has presented on the subject and written on the subject, and knows a great deal about it. And so you'll be well advised here by the lawyers from the City Attorney's Office as questions arise and as you seek guidance. So you should never hesitate to contact us if you have questions of any kind, technical questions, procedural questions, Brown Act questions. We're here to help you. You can ask us directly, or you can work through Angela or Suja, whatever your preference, and we'll get the answers to those questions to you. Russ, you had your hand up.
I did, and it goes way back to when we were talking about the potential business person who might be behind this law, and then something that you said that I needed a little clarification on. My reading of this is that it's no more than 2 versus no fewer, which is, I think you said. And then also that no delivery service other than the ones in Hermosa Beach would be allowed to service Hermosa Beach. And then the one that really got my attention is that it strips City Council of all power to change this, or the city manager to change this after it passes as written. And all that to me seemed like somebody who's ready to go with submitting this process and wants to pull the ladder up behind them so they don't have to compete with anybody. I also looked at that points process, and while it is very complicated, I don't see a lot of qualitative differentiation in what the points are for. It doesn't really put any restrictions, and it gives points for things like, oh, we're going to create an org chart without necessarily stipulating what goes in there, or a security plan. And I realize that's later in the document. And so it just read to me like a bunch of boxes to be checked as opposed to specific things that the city might be looking for. And I just wanted to make sure I'm reading that right, and just kind of talk about it a little bit.
Yes, it says no more than 2. So you're right about that. But if you have a qualified applicant, I think it would be challenging to not grant at least 2. You're correct that the actual language says no more than 2. With respect to it not being susceptible to being amended by the city council, that's correct. That is typical of an ordinance adopted by initiative. And the rule is, or any ordinance on any subject matter adopted by an initiative petition and adopted by the people and an election cannot be altered, amended, or repealed except by the people, unless the ordinance itself grants the city council the authority to amend it. Okay? So it is permanently a law unless it is later amended or repealed by another vote of the people. Now, this particular initiative does in fact delegate some things to the city, some decisions to the city council. For example, it says that the city council has discretion to allow or not to allow other types of cannabis operations, such as manufacturing, such as cultivation, such as laboratory testing. So the council could decide not to allow those, and that would be okay under this ordinance. But the main issues that I addressed earlier, the maximum of 2, the distancing requirements, et cetera, those would not be changeable, amendable in any way, or repealable except by another vote of the people. As far as the criteria are concerned, that's certainly something that we can talk about at a future meeting. There's a certain amount of subjectivity built into this. The city manager, unfortunately for her, is stuck with making these decisions and applying these criteria. And I think that to some extent you're right that the subjectivity lends itself to the potential for some legal challenges by unsuccessful applicants. And that's not something I'm prepared to get into in a lot of detail tonight because this is your introductory meeting. But I think Russ, you've made an astute observation about this, and it's certainly something that the group can talk about going forward, keeping in mind that ultimately, you don't really want to spend a whole lot of time evaluating this initiative, except insofar as it helps to inform you about what kind of recommendations you want to make to the City Council. I see two other hands, and unfortunately, I didn't see.
Real quick, the delivery piece.
You're right about the delivery, that it does not allow delivery from outside the city. So the only deliveries could be from the two operators who are licensed in Hermosa Beach.
And how would that be enforced?
Well, as I said earlier, it's not easy. It's not easy. And I don't, and that creates the potential for some issues as well, because suppose this were to pass and you were to have two operators and they were to come to the city and say, we want you to enforce this. And we want you to devote police resources to enforcing this. And later on in your process, the police chief will have an opportunity to talk about his perspective on some of these issues. I don't know that it's feasible, and that and certainly they couldn't compel the city to devote resources to enforcing it. But you don't exactly see marked vehicles coming into the city. And frankly, the fear of theft.
This prohibits it, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but I'm saying from an enforcement perspective, it's not easy.
No, I mean, it prohibits marking the vehicles, I believe.
Well, right. I mean, and for good reason, because that would create a law enforcement issue itself.
Yeah.
So
train robbery.
The delivery issue is in and of itself a very difficult problem to address, both now with a ban in effect, and if something like this were to pass.
And is there anything here that would stipulate a single operator from taking both licenses? Because I didn't see that.
I don't see that either, but my interpretation is that you only get one license per operator.
But nothing about co-ownership of the second license or anything like that?
Well, again, no, but my interpretation would be one license per operator, and a licensed operator could not have a majority interest in another license.
Okay, and so Mike, we have Nathan, and then we have Andrea afterward, and Dave and Cami. Andrea didn't have her virtual hand up, but she's after Nathan. So
Nathan, go ahead.
And forgive my ignorance of the 11th Amendment, but could you speak to any of the potential risks or liabilities to the city with regards to the federal illegality, right? Is the city subject to any particular risk if they were to adopt an, ordinance allowing the sale? I guess we know this isn't being enforced broadly, but it seems that there's an easy target on the city if the city goes forward with adopting part of this ordinance.
Well, I don't really see much of a risk for the city. Obviously, there's always risk for commercial cannabis operators were the federal government to decide to restart enforcement. Over the years, I have seen different levels of enforcement from the U.S. Attorney's Office prior to Prop 64. There was enforcement, and I mean, it was not universal. It was somewhat selective, but there was enforcement against some of the medical marijuana clinics. Since Prop 64, enforcement has virtually disappeared. If there were enforcement, I mean, Hermosa Beach, if this were to pass in Hermosa Beach, we are by far not the first locality in California to allow this. There's a lot of localities. I don't really see Hermosa being being a target, but the real target would be the commercial operators, not the city. The city would not really have any skin in the game. And so I think the risk of enforcement against the city would be very low, or of any adverse consequences, let me put it that way, from enforcement would be very low. Andrea.
Okay, thank you. It says in the initiative that it's limited to 2, but it could be changed if a court decided that we could have more than 2. How does that affect us? How would the court get involved to decide that a 3rd or a 4th store could be opened? And
if an unsuccessful applicant were to sue the city and challenge the ordinance, and the court were to rule that the ordinance was in some respect invalid because it limited the number of establishments to 2, then that would be the circumstance under which a court could order the city to process a 3rd or 4th application. Okay. So I'm not suggesting that that's a likely scenario. I'm just suggesting that you asked me, how could that come up? And the most likely scenario would be by way of a lawsuit from an unhappy applicant.
And the other part of my question, or the second question, would be, I thought the way I read it was that the city manager had to take the first 2 applications and process them, and all the other applications other people who put their applications in would be disregarded because the first 2 are the ones that she has to work on. And to me, that was kind of the skewing that, well, our company has pushed this initiative and we know all the things that we need to do. So we'll be, ready, set, go when day 1 happens. So I'm just wondering, is that really possible that the ordinance could limit the city manager to only review the first 2 applications?
So what I'm reading is that it says that that if it passes within 45 days of its effective date, the city manager shall make forms available for interested commercial cannabis permit applicants to fill out the forms and submit. Then it says that they shall have 30 days from the date that the forms are made available to submit a complete application to the city manager. And then after that deadline has passed, the city manager shall review timely submitted applications to ascertain if they meet the minimum requirements. So I'm not seeing here that the city manager can only review 2. I'm seeing that the city manager can review however many are timely submitted before the 30-day deadline.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure. Who did we say was next, Dave?
Right. I don't want to obsess over this. I know that you want us to review this, but not obsess over it. But I do have another question. So if about the limit of 2, it sounds like it's essentially unenforceable. If somebody decides to challenge it, you would have to, the 2 would go away and the court
No,
doesn't.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
We have lots of cities that have imposed numerical limits, and those numerical limits are allowed by state law. And as long as we are following the ordinance, and as long as we are processing the applications in accordance with the criteria and acting reasonably, I think that a limit of 2 would be upheld.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. But it would potentially go to court to be resolved.
Well, I think that, that some unsuccessful, unhappy applicant, the one who comes in 3rd or 4th, could go to court and take Russ's theory that these criteria are too vague, or that they're allow for arbitrary and capricious decision-making or whatever, and seek to invalidate it, or to invalidate the city's issuance of a license. So, I mean, yeah, there's any number of possibilities. There are, I've been involved with this process, that is to say the cannabis regulatory process, in 2 other jurisdictions, and unhappily, both of them were sued in the course of the process, the application and decision-making process. One of those lawsuits ultimately was resolved by way of a settlement, but it ultimately required some adjustments to the ordinance. But that was not an initiative ordinance. That was a council adopted ordinance. The other one is currently pending. So does cannabis create litigation? Sure.
Okay. All right. And I might have missed it, but was there something limiting having multiple stores near each other? I know that there's distance to parks and
no.
So it could be that there's 2, or if they're successful and prevail in court, that there's 3 or some, near each other potentially.
Well, I mean, given the paucity of available locations, and you look at the map, given the paucity of available locations, the likelihood is that if there were to, they could be relatively close to one another.
Okay. And then my other question is, Russ talked about this a little bit, but the delivery. So we have 2 licensed businesses, theoretically in Hermosa. They're very frustrated because the outside delivery companies are coming in. They can't do anything about it. They can ask for support, or they can ask for enforcement. Could that potentially turn into a legal situation if the city cannot enforce it, or refuses to enforce it, or is seen as refusing to enforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, as you know, Dave, anybody can bring a lawsuit.
Sure.
I don't, and they wouldn't be the first to try to force a city to enforce the law in a particular way. That lawsuit, generally speaking, is a loser. I mean, there's a lot of case law out there that says that no person can sue a city and force a city to enforce its laws in a particular way. So I think that whether we were sued or not, I don't think it would be a winner. But and it would certainly engender some pretty bad blood. But the truth of the matter is, it's very difficult to enforce against delivery, and so I'll just leave it there.
All right, thank you.
Cami was next.
I just want to ask, since with this initiative and lots of control that they seem to have, what is this? I guess I don't know how to phrase it, but this becomes under what zoning code, or do we have criminal code? So what happens now? They come in, what is this, a zoning code that we're going to be able to, if something goes wrong with them, or we have criminal code when they come in with something goes wrong? Like what's kind of our protection against them? Because just a zoning code seems like what all you can just kind of find them, correct?
Well, basically, they're going to get a permit if this were to pass, right? So hypothetically, if this were to pass, one or two applicants would get a permit and set up an operation. Those permits would be subject to conditions. Those conditions are allowed by the ordinance. Operating conditions, hours, and noise, and security requirements and such, right? That permit could be revoked by the city following due process if they were in violation of their conditions. So that's
so we can set up the conditions for the permit, you're saying?
Right, just like any use in the city that has a conditional use permit, if the permittee is violating the conditions of approval, the permit can be revoked and they can be stopped from operating. If they were to engage in illegal conduct, then they could be subject to criminal prosecution for criminal conduct. In other words, there are certain things they're not allowed to do, right? If they were to sell different kind of drugs besides cannabis, that'd be illegal. So they could be criminally prosecuted for that sort of activity. And we have remedies in our code for things like noise nuisances, which are probably not going to be the kind of issue we're worried about here. Some cannabis operations in some jurisdictions have experienced problems with people basically using in their cars, in their parked cars after they get the product and doing it in neighborhoods. And that's a potential issue. And that's one that, we would deal with through law enforcement as best we could. But does that pretty much answer the question? Okay. All right. Heidi, you have your hand up.
So we were talking about lawsuits, people suing the city, and could it be argued that keeping the ban would be more of a protective factor against lawsuits?
Well, yeah. I mean, under state law, and unless state law changes in some way that I can't predict, but under current state law, as it reads today, we have the right as a community to ban commercial cannabis operations. And consequently, I'm not aware of any theory under which someone could assert that they have a right to engage in a commercial cannabis operation in a city that bans it. And the case law is, in fact, to the contrary. So if you don't do anything aside from what you've got now, if you just have a ban, then yeah, I don't see any bases for lawsuits. Russ, you have your hand up again?
There was a hold harmless provision in the law there, isn't there, where the business would have to defend the city in the event of that kind of lawsuit?
Are you talking about in the initiative ordinance?
Yes.
Yeah, there is a the ordinance provides that the city shall not assume any liability, and that they will defend and indemnify the city. So if a third party were to sue, for example, an unsuccessful applicant, they would be on the hook for for defending and indemnifying the city in that lawsuit.
In the case that somebody sued the city for an accident or injury or something related to cannabis, that would apply as well, right?
That's not as clear, Russ. It's the defense and indemnification obligation is as a result of the approval of the permit, which goes more to the lawsuit by the unsuccessful applicant, not the kind of lawsuit you're talking about. So if somebody ingests cannabis after buying it in their car and then drives away and then gets into an accident, then the question is, could they sue the city for having allowed the cannabis operation? I think that lawsuit would be unsuccessful. They might sue the cannabis operator, but that lawsuit against the city would be unsuccessful. But as I read this indemnity paragraph, they wouldn't have a duty to defend and indemnify the city in that sort of a lawsuit. Okay. All right, so I don't see any other hands, and we've taken quite a bit longer, I think, than Suja contemplated with this. So I'm going to conclude. Thanks for all your interesting and good questions and your interest. As I said, my staff will be assisting you as this process goes forward. So if you have other questions, write them down, save them. You'll have ample opportunity to get them asked and answered. And with that, Suja, I will turn it back over to you, and I will say goodnight.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. I know Mike has to get going after his portion. So if there are any additional questions, you certainly have the opportunity to ask our city attorney, whether it's Pat or Lauren next time, or you can send questions by email. We'll provide the question and answer publicly through the set of materials that you'll receive for your next meeting. So you have additional opportunities to ask further questions, and we hope to have a city attorney representative at every meeting, so that, because we know things come up. So with that, we've concluded that portion. What I wanted to check back in with everyone is on the decision-making process. If you wanted to discuss that now, I think this would be a good time. You know, perhaps you can share with me your thoughts on consensus versus majority based. And I know you've all participated in different groups before, so I can either just ask for a show of hands, or we can have an open discussion about it if you had any thoughts on it, if you had any questions. You also don't have to decide today, but if you were prepared to, then we can do that, or we can take that up at another time too. What are your thoughts on that? So how about, go ahead, Cami, I think you were about to say something. Were you?
Well, since why keep delaying it and decide, I'm going to say majority, only just because I think this group is under, we have how many set meetings we have. And obviously the city needs our thoughts sooner rather than later, just because August becomes your deadline, no matter how you look at any of this, right? Because if we don't decide, then, and they get the signatures, they'll do what they're going to do then. So I'm going to say majority, just to keep it that everybody still gets their opinion in. And because I worry if you don't get a consensus, then where are you at the end of March? Then what happens? I guess now I'm okay with either one. I just feel like, now what do you do if you don't get the consensus? Now what do you tell the city then? Now nothing gets handed to them, or I just see how do you end it then?
Okay, thank you. Russ?
Sure, I agree. I think a majority vote's the way to go. My experience with consensus is if everyone comes in without a strong opinion and kind of willing to interact and go with the group, then consensus can be achieved pretty quickly and easily. But when we have group members who are pretty outspoken in one specific position, basically, if anybody doesn't take that position, the consensus can't happen. And I think we might be looking at that with this group.
Okay, thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, I'd only add that if we're committed to making a decision about the process today, choosing majority doesn't preclude us from having a consensus opinion by the end, but the other way around isn't actually feasible. So this is, I guess consider this the third chiming in for a majority, and that also preserves the most flexibility given there are, as we just learned, multiple options for the city to consider. We might as well be prepared to have similar set of recommendations.
Absolutely, appreciate that. Yeah, and we can continue discussing that also as we go along. But I do appreciate the optimist in Nathan's comments. It does not preclude you from doing that, and a lot of times I have found that is actually what happens. So, thank you, Andrea. Were you going to say something? I thought I might have seen a hand up, but no? Okay. All right. So at this time, if we could go ahead and move on to public comment, I'm going to go ahead and ask Anne to open that up. So we are now at the public participation period of the meeting. As a reminder, if you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand to be placed in the queue. I think we see someone in queue already. If participating by phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. We will end the public participation period at 7:30 to allow some time for the advisory group members for their questions and comments. If you do not get an opportunity to speak this evening, you may submit written communication at any time to Anne. And Anne's email address is anny@hermosabeach.gov, or speak at one of our future meetings. And you are welcome to join us at every one of these meetings. With that, Anne, would you please announce the first speaker in queue?
Yes, thank you, Susha. And if you could just state your name for the record when you're called on, your full name. The first speaker is Dana Cisneros.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Dana.
Oh, okay. So first of all, Russ, thank you so much for paying attention to all of the details. My name is Dana Cisneros. I am an attorney that focuses on cannabis, business and real estate matters throughout California. So I wanted to just point out a couple of things. As the city attorney alluded to, there's lawsuits that are likely to happen. In fact, the proponent of this ordinance is often the plaintiff. So that's sort of just part of it. And it really only happens when you have merit-based processes. If the city instead approaches it through a zoning restriction process, that will help alleviate a lot of those issues. Additionally, I can't encourage you strongly enough to give the city council the power to make adjustments to the ordinance, especially with respect to retail. 2 is a very low number in my opinion, and the ordinance is extremely skewed in favor of the larger applicants. It does absolutely nothing to combat the illicit market because it does not provide opportunities for what we call legacy operators to move into the licensed market, which indeed was the goal of Prop 64 and the will of the voters. The structure really does promote oligopolistic behavior. This was recently written about by the Minority Cannabis Business Association as being contrary to fundamental principles of equity. I could go on and on about delivery and retail. Just by way of note, the state law, when you have a retail license, you are actually allowed to engage in both delivery and storefront operations. I believe that the accurate legal interpretation of this ordinance would be that both licenses would go to whomever prevails. So there would be only 2 license holders in the city, unless by chance one of the winners did not wish to engage in retail activity. I would like you to also think about tax structure and how that may work for the city. I don't agree that high potency products should be restricted from the market. For people who are under 21, we have a lot of veterans that need high dose THC products. In fact, it is really the focus of many compassion programs throughout the state, through SB 34, where retailers can make donations to veterans. And it's important that our veterans who are willing to put their lives on the line can pick the medicine that they want to take for the diseases that they suffer with when they come back, or that they suffer as a result. So I think that we really should, be cognizant of, and also, there's also people under 21 who need it for other medical reasons. With that, I'll just end it there and continue to participate and possibly send in my other comments. But thank you all so much. It's really obvious that you guys are grasping this and paying attention, and I'm sure that the Hermosa Beach voters really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Karen Klink.
Okay, here I am. Okay, guess you can't see me, but you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I really appreciate what Dana just said. I don't know everything about this, and I'm still learning. But what I feel like is that this initiative is completely set up in favor of this particular group or business, and I don't. From what I can read, that this is that it will be just their stores. I mean, their initiative excludes a lot of smaller businesses. You have to have a lot of money. You have to have a lot of cash. You have to have certain points. So it would be them. That's what they're setting up. It would just be them. So I don't know that for sure, but I wish that Mike would still be on the call so I could get some answers. But and there is, from what I understand, this city doesn't collect any taxes. But when they came to my door, they told me that taxes were involved for the city. So they're not truthful on a lot of things when they came to the door. But when I looked it up, they said, "Oh no, 2%." Well, I looked it up, and 2% is something they're planning on donating. Well, donating and taxes are not the same thing. So they're not truthful. They're not above board. It's just all in favor of them. And then the delivery thing, I need some clarification on, because, you can say that you're not supposed to deliver from another city, but if somebody like the people that Dana was just talking about needs marijuana, I'm sure there's being marijuana delivered to the city. And if there's not, then you also have a problem, because ADA wise, people that can't get out to get their marijuana and they need it, they need a way to get their marijuana delivered. So I don't understand how that can happen. They either need it delivered within Hermosa Beach or from without Hermosa Beach, but I don't think you can say it can't be done. And then you said something about the we can keep it banned, but that may be today, but it may not be in a year. So eventually you have to, the inevitable that you might have to have a marijuana store in your city, and you should plan for that. And that's why I believe that, the city should have its own initiative and not count on the fact that we're going to vote to ban it for the rest of forever. We should have our own initiative. It should not follow the initiative of this company, this Catalyst and this Stacker guy, because it shouldn't be. We should have make our own rules and the city should collect taxes. That's my feeling about the whole thing. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Karen.
Next, we have Matt Mccool.
Good Good evening, advisory group. Matt Mccool. Wanted to go ahead and comment on this. I appreciate the opportunity to go ahead and speak here. Go ahead and qualify my comments. I am not a cannabis user. I have been drug tested by the United States Navy since 2004. Prior to that, all the way back to my high school days, my high school football coach randomly drug tested us. So I have never used any illegal drugs. I do not believe, in my opinion, this is an issue about cannabis for the city of Hermosa Beach. I base every decision as a utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number. I do not see the benefit add to the city of Hermosa Beach moving forward with this. I know two cities have been mentioned earlier, was the city of Long Beach and the city of Oakland. These are populations of excess of 400, maybe 450 in population. The economies of scale, it's a completely different scope, but I do not see the benefit for the city to go ahead and move forward with this. And not only that, the risk and the liability that comes with this is not good for the city. So I asked the group here to go ahead going forward to actually go ahead and evaluate not the actual cannabis aspect of this, but the city resources that are going to have to be allocated to manage this. Thank you for your time. Good night. God bless.
Thank you, Matt.
And next is Trent Larson.
Yeah. Okay. No camera, right? Or can I do camera?
You can do camera.
Yeah, go ahead, my camera.
Promote you. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hi. Hello, advisory board. How you doing? And city staff, Suja. Thank you for taking this on and been listening. Appreciate it. So I don't want the brick and mortar stores in Hermosa Beach. I don't want it. So, and there's lots of reasons for that. But I will tell you some of the experiences that I've had locally. So Colin, the canvasser who's going around trying to get the people to sign up for the initiative to be on the ballot, and I talked for about 20 minutes. He kept coming back to my house. So he said, and I was kind of shocked about this, but he told me he volunteered this, that like 75% of the people are saying that no, they don't want this in Hermosa. They don't want the brick and mortar stores in Hermosa. And I was kind of shocked about that. But that's what he said, and he hadn't even gotten down to the Strand yet, where he says it's going to be more. And, you know, him and I had this long conversation. There was a lot going back and forth. But you know, the whole thing about the delivery, and that's, you know, banned, quote unquote, but listening to Jenkins and everybody else, you can't stop it. I mean, there's plenty of ways for people in Hermosa Beach to get marijuana. It's easy to do it. You can go get it at retail outlets really close in the South Bay. Tom Buckley is in the healthcare business, as far as I know. And he had a couple of things, you know, Tom, you speak in, you know, you don't speak like I do per se necessarily directly to things, but I can appreciate you for that. And when you mentioned accessibility and acceptability, well, that is exactly what it is. So accessibility and then acceptability, and it just becomes more the norm and okay, but I don't want it here in Hermosa. So, you know, and then talking about engaging the youth, I'm not sure what you meant by that, Tom, but, you know, because that's everywhere, right? And when you say that, that's a big picture, and I would like to hear some more specifics on that. You know, some of the other stuff I heard about Nathan, the process and critical insights and emotional things, that to me also is a lot of lip speak, because this is an emotional issue. And things should be emotional. People are emotional and issues are emotional, and emotion counts. And all this stuff on just the stats and this, that, and the other, that can be manipulated just the same. So, you know, you can manipulate stats in how you present them and make an emotional case with numbers. So it is emotional, and I'm trying to protect Hermosa's youth as best as possible, because there's a lot of downsides to substance abuse. So think about that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Trent.
Next, we have Heather N. Heather, it looks like you're using an older version of Zoom, so I have to promote you to panelist. So give me one moment.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name's Heather. I just wanted to partake in this meeting. I've lived in Hermosa for almost 6 years now. I've actually been involved in the cannabis industry for about 5 years now. I cover all of Southern California. I've been in over 150 different retail locations from Los Angeles all the way to Palm Springs, San Diego. And I just wanted to share my insight on my experiences at those locations. First of all, just touching on a safety aspect, I personally myself have never felt unsafe in any situation. I'm in dispensaries Monday through Friday, again, all over the state. Those dispensaries provide their own security. So as far as touching on security issues and parking lot issues, smoking around the premises, I've never seen anything from my experience in that. And also, I would say the benefits that I've seen all of these counties from Torrance, to all the way down to, yes, Palm Desert, Palm Springs, everywhere. It's provided a lot of growth in those communities and a lot of happy workers. I could touch on the tax benefits as well. I don't know what you guys have worked out for that, but I can tell you that everyone that I know that goes to dispensaries around here in Hermosa, they're just popping over to Torrance. They're going up to Playa Vista. They're driving to Santa Monica. So why not hone in on that and, Hermosa benefit from that tax advantage and help promote jobs in the community and more importantly, safe access to these products. I know that someone else had also mentioned that these products aren't safe. I can tell you firsthand that they are extremely, extremely regulated. There's a Clean Green certified program out there that the state goes in and certifies these products to make sure they are basically organic without saying that they are indeed organic. A lot of testing goes into these products to make sure that they are safe for anyone that consumes them. What it's doing is by bringing these cannabis retail locations here, you're providing safe products because a lot of the youth and kids are going to go to these trap shops, where they can access harmful products and they can purchase without being 21 and older. All of the cannabis retail locations that I have been to, you have to be 21 and older to enter them. So that's basically just my piece coming from the actual cannabis business side. And I think it would be very beneficial to our community.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks.
Next is Kent Allen. And Kent, let me promote you.
Hi there, Kent. Welcome.
Hear me and see me?
We hear you. We don't see
You just
you.
need to turn on your camera.
Tell me when you can see me.
There you are.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I think City Attorney and Diamond Bar Jenkins did a really good job of presenting the facts. I agree with Trent Larson and Matt Mccool. Given the nature of this committee, I believe that every one of you should state your use of cannabis ahead of time. I think you should just go on record. I'm going to go on record right now. I smoked it in 1974 when I was a sophomore in high school. And I would like every one of you to say the same thing, to say when you did it. The purpose of my call is to really question the appointment of Russ Gilbert to this committee, because I think he is. I think what standing does he have in this city? To my knowledge, he has no children, owns no property, owns no business. His only commitment to this city is the his commitment to his landlord, of which he can give 30 days notice and say, hey, I'm moving out of town. Why would we have this guy in the city, in this committee? This guy is a known internet troll. Here he is trolling me from 2016. I didn't even know who this nerd was in 2016. And him and some guy named, I don't even know who this guy is, Jay Constable, is trolling me. And he's been trolling me for years. And he's called personal family members of my personal members of my family. And I think you got to get rid of this guy. Okay. He's nothing more than an internet troll who runs a little Facebook page, which he self-admittedly deletes comments from. And I'm just, his harassment is out of control. So I hope you all will consider removing him from this board or committee or advisory group, whatever you want to call it, and just dump the guy. He's just a loser. Thank you.
Thanks, Kent.
Okay, next we have Abramson Architects. If you could state your name for the record.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, that's not, I guess that's my work thing. Can we turn, let me see, turn on my camera? How can I turn on my camera?
Sure, let me promote you, give me one moment.
Do I do stay as an attendee or join as a panelist? What, a panelist?
Yes. This way you can turn on your camera.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
We can hear you.
Yes, you just need to turn on your camera. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for agreeing to do this. I know it takes hours of your time, so I do appreciate that. I have some concerns because I don't think people who have a financial interest in the outcome should be on the committee. And I think there might be some people who do have financial interest. So I just wanted to say that, and I think everybody should be aware of what that is. And I also want to say that I'm here as an individual. This has nothing to do with like my company, okay? So first thing I just want to note is that in our town, we're pretty much known for promoting health. As a matter of fact, there's a ban on smoking in our town, and the city council has even wanted to ban the sale of cigarettes. So the fact that we would then, that you guys would then ever even consider asking the city to even put on a competing ordinance on the ballot, which I don't know in the end what you guys would be doing, but I think that's something to take into consideration, that it's completely contrary to the way the city has been run. I would say you don't put a price tag on health and safety. And anybody who says that let's do this for the money doesn't realize that you shouldn't put a price tag on health and safety. Also want to note that when it comes to sales tax and the way it's currently structured, only a penny goes to the city of every dollar of retail sale. A previous speaker mentioned that she thought the city, if the city was going to put an ordinance on the book, should allow high potency products. I'll say right now that I think it'd be really important for you guys to become educated on the negative effects of high potency products, how it affects brain development, what it does to people who are younger. I think there's a lot of dangers of high potency products. Oh, that's probably somebody trying to get us to sign the initiative. Also, sorry about that. Okay, so sorry, a few other things. So as it relates to other cities that have had issues with cannabis dispensaries in Pasadena, and if this does come up, they actually did go after the city. They did sue the city because they didn't feel the ordinance that the city actually put into place was fair. And the city had to spend time defending themselves, and they ended up actually having to add more dispensaries. So if you guys are going to consider proposing that the city put an initiative on the ballot, you really should research what happened in Pasadena. And so let's see here. One thing I also want to note before my time runs out is I remember talking to the police chief, and she talked about, running out of time. She talked about how the dosing is not clear for people, that a quarter of a cookie is a dose, and then people will eat a little bit, not feel anything, eat more, and before you know it, they've way overdosed. And so I just think it's really important for you guys to understand dosing and high potency products. So again, I'll end it there. Thank you so much, representing myself. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it. Are there any more hands up, Anne, or anyone
We
queuing?
don't have any more hands at this time. Oh, one more,
Okay.
Maria Victoria.
Okay, this is her husband. I'm Javier Haas. Maria's right next to me right here.
No problem, Javier. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. I'm a Los Angeles Unified School teacher, teach high school. Okay, and let me just tell you what I see and hear and smell. Every day there's pot smoke in the hallways. Okay, these kids are getting, legally and medical, legal marijuana sold in stores and medical marijuana sold in dispensaries, whatever. And it's purchased and then they're able to get their hands on it and they bring it to school. They smoke it in the girls' bathroom, in the boys' bathroom, in the hallways. And it's really shocking as a teacher to try to teach kids that are high. You can't. They have no memory, no short-term memory. You can't teach them anything. I see their behavior get just completely altered and they get wildly out of control. I mainly teach freshmen and sophomore students, but I have juniors and maybe a couple seniors as well. It really is a terrifying issue. We can't have this in Hermosa Beach, not with our kids. And I'm a dad. I have the kids all over the place. And I told the guy that was going around asking, what he caught. I mean, I was walking my dog, but he knew all about me. He said, he called me by my name and knew where I lived, knew my age, knew my political affiliation. I don't know where he got all this information from, but he knew everything about me. And that was disturbing. And I told him, I said, look, this community is full of kids. He goes, oh, there's kids in every community. I said, excuse me, there are a lot of kids in this community. And if you have legal dispensaries here in Hermosa Beach, the kids are going to get their hands on the stuff. And it's because it becomes very readily available to them. We don't need this here in Hermosa. We don't need it at all. I've seen the effects on the kids. And it creates a psychosis with them. Okay, and I have to deal with this every day as a teacher, and it's very sad. It's terrifying, and it's tragic. We don't need it here in this community. Someone wants to get weed or any marijuana products, they can go elsewhere. They can get it, and I don't begrudge any 21 or year old or older to use it, or our veterans. But we don't need it here in this community. We don't need it readily available. That's really all I have to say about it. Okay, so thank you.
I don't see any more hands raised. Oh, one more. Laura Pena.
Now it's me.
Let's see.
You.
Hi. Hello,
Hi.
Silvia. This is Maria.
Oh, Maria.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Maria Haas.
Maria and then Laura Pena.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Mine is very short. I don't understand why the city of Hermosa Beach has been potentially chosen as a city to add dispensaries. This is a city for families. This is a city for children. This is a very, very small city. People who want to buy it can go to LAX, to Torrance, like one of the ladies say, to Gardena, whatever. But why in our beloved city that everybody cares about? Please get out of here. Thank you.
Okay. Laura?
Hi, yes, this is Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I want to thank the city manager and staff, and I especially want to thank all the volunteers on this advisory committee for volunteering your time and your expertise your background, whether you live here or not. You have a business here. I just appreciate the amount of time and effort that you're going to spend in the next 4 or 5 meetings really deliberating all of this. I'm really looking forward to the facts. I'm looking forward to actual data, experts, because it's important, as you'll hear from some of the callers, they don't understand why this is being done. And how I understand it is that there was a resident in our community, Colton Chacker, who has yet to speak at any of these meetings. And he had filed something with the city clerk to put an initiative on, get signatures so that maybe he could get enough to put it on the ballot. Now, considering that around 70% of residents in Hermosa voted for Prop 64, that does not mean that we want a dispensary in our city, but it tells us that we have a lot of people in the city who think positively in one way or another of not criminalizing marijuana, and I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean that we want a dispensary in here. So my concern is that this person who's gathering signatures is not really communicating facts, who's not really communicating data, and people are signing this, not realizing that this is going to go on the ballot. And if we get, 1,500 signatures, people could vote. And this will severely restrict our city from doing what it takes for enforcement and selection of an appropriate business. So I strongly urge coming up with something, not necessarily keeping the ban, because I'm concerned that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have a dispensary here. But I'm concerned that if the city doesn't come up with its own initiative, if that measure passes, we're going to have to live with it. And saying that we want to ban dispensaries is not going to help. Now, as residents, we could vote it down. We could vote the measure down. We can say we don't want it through our actual ballot. And I'm hoping that's what will happen. But again, we'll see. So I just urge this committee to really consider putting up something that will compete against this proposed measure. I definitely think we should create a cannabis tax if it gets passed. And I just really, really hope that the community realizes that if you feel you've signed this initiative to get on the ballot and you were misled, you can reach out to the city clerk and have your name removed. So don't feel like you're locked into this. I look forward to hearing the discussions during the rest of the meetings. And again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura.
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay. Thank you to everyone that weighed in from the community for public comment. And again, please feel free to send written comments to Anne so that that can be sent out to all the members if there are additional things you'd like to comment on. And at this time, I wanted to go ahead and turn it back over. Generally, what we do, at least during council meetings, is if after public comment, if there are any questions that members of the group have or any final wrap-up thoughts, we could go ahead and do that. We can also share with you what we have in mind for the next meeting, and you see that in your agenda. We're still working on that, and so we may add one or more items to that. But at this time, if anyone has any additional comments or thoughts, I do want to say that any comments that were aimed at any individual member that were disparaging, it is not something that we condone, of course, but we cannot control public comment. I do want you to know that that does not go unnoticed by me and my staff. It's the beauty of the public process, and I want you to know I cherish and value each and every one of your commitment. And not only did you volunteer to be here, but you are absolutely qualified to be here. And so I want to thank you for that. And to the extent possible, please try to disregard any disparaging remarks that are just not helpful or useful or relevant. So thank you. Any comments from folks? Any comments or thoughts on topics you'd like to be sure that we get covered? Heidi?
Can I comment on some comments?
You can definitely, but again, I want to be sure that we don't occupy too much time and space on that. But
Oh, all right. Then maybe I should let you go ahead and get all the things that you need to.
Yeah, we don't want public comment to be a debate between members of the group. I mean, take them in, receive public comments, have them as part of your own deliberative process as you're coming up and openly discussing items and topics. Feel free to share, but that would not be the best use of all of your time, is to debate anything that's been stated. I think just as you are free to have your point of view and your perspective, and you draw on your own knowledge and experience to come up with those, folks from the community have the same. And so I think having a debate is probably not helpful.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay, just want to look to our city team and be sure that we did not miss anything that we had hoped to cover. Okay. And then if I'm looking at, I know we would like to, one of the topics for the next meeting is a health and well-being aspect. I know I will have someone from the cannabis industry, a professional, join us. And you've heard some comments from folks, I think, during public comment. But I think it'll be useful to be able to ask that person questions, and hopefully that will be helpful. And we'll also have our police chief who will make a presentation at our next meeting. Cami?
I just wanted to ask, because I didn't see any discussion about taxation. So I don't want to comment specifically to the people that brought that up, but I didn't see that as an item. And I do think that's important to either get to, or just to make sure this group talks about, because I do think, as much as we can say health and this, that, and the other, money is always a high proponent to many things. I do think people think money and hear about money. And so I guess I just want to make sure, since this was brought up by the lawyer, I just thought I would say nowhere in there does it say her city of Hermosa Beach gets any money. So we can sit and say, well, we'll do our own referendum and have people vote on it, and that costs the city money. And San Francisco, so someplace close, that all these companies then that got the taxation, they're now asking for relief from taxation. So, and we can, I'm not trying to debate that. I'm just saying we don't have that kind of as a topic at all. And I think money is going to come up with people of like, but Hermosa should get money for this. And so anyway.
I'm glad you brought that up, Cami. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I realize that that wasn't necessarily articulated in the agenda. So we will definitely cover that. I think we can have more than one discussion on that. When we have a presentation from any city staff, for instance, next time we'll have one from Chief LeBaron, I think you'll have a sense of the cost that may be involved. And there are costs with any business. I want to be abundantly clear. It's not just cannabis, but I think having our police chief, who does have experience in other cities where we've had retail operations and we've had operations that were not permitted, and what that would be. So there's that aspect of it. And then at the next meeting, and perhaps even the following meeting, we can have a presentation, at least from the cannabis industry, as well as from us, those of us who have worked in cities that have taxation for this item, for this operation, a discussion on what's allowed, what other cities are doing, does that or does that not provide a positive net to city general funds, or is that somehow nullified by the expenses that the city may incur? And so I think that's a great point you raise. You're right, it wasn't spelled out, but it'll be at least introduced in the second meeting and then probably extended to the third meeting. And if you'll recall, City Attorney Jenkins mentioned that you're right, it doesn't add that component to it. I think one of the speakers mentioned that the initiative talks about donating 2% to the city. But from a taxation standpoint, the city unfortunately would have to put that on a ballot. The city can't determine that by ordinance alone. And so there are a couple of options for that, and we can discuss that. Okay, Andrea?
Yeah, in one of the articles I read in either the Easy Reader or the Beach Reporter, the man who was initiating the initiative said that they did not purposely put taxation into the initiative. That was the business of the city, and he just wanted to get a vehicle for having dispensaries in the cities, in the 3 beach cities. It would be up to the city to put another initiative on to tax the cannabis sales.
And that's one way, of course. Other initiatives in other cities include the taxation piece. I suppose leaving taxation for the city to determine is one way of showing that the city too can participate. It's an interesting strategy, and initiative proponents approach it differently. And so your observation is, and your comments about what the newspaper article stated are correct, that they are leaving it to the city.
I wish that all the residents in the city would read the local papers. I know one friend of mine made a comment that it was like reading fairy tales or something negative with a negative connotation. But in all the years that I've been living here, and in particular the years where I've been active with the city on different committees or with the No on Oil, I always tell the people, you should read the local paper because it has a lot of information about what's going on, either put out by the city or by proponents or non-proponents of whatever's going on. So it's a good source of information, and you can always fact check it.
Thank you. Heidi?
So the medical expert Nick is from the cannabis industry, is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. You broke up a little.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think I understood. No, they're 2 different people. They would be 2 different people. I have the recommendation you made, of course, and I'm also taking recommendations from others, but they are 2 different people. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks for the clarification.
Of course. Dave?
Just on the taxation. So if I'm correct in this assumption, the initiative, if this one gets the signatures and goes on the ballot, that could pass, but the voters could vote down the taxation if the city proposes a tax. So we could end up with legalized cannabis stores and no tax for the city. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a risk. Yes.
Okay. And then another question, and I have to do more research on this, but as a restaurant owner that sells alcohol, we have the health department, the alcoholic beverage control, the local code enforcement, and local police. Those are the sort of the 4 oversight groups. Is there anything the state equivalent, or is it all for the cannabis shops, or is it all just local code enforcement and the local police?
So there is a state entity that was formed a few years back, and our presenter next week can go into the details of what all of that allows and provides for local communities. And what their role is. And I think it's very helpful to see what the state's role is along with what local entities can do. So I think that'll be thoroughly covered next time. Yeah. Oh, there you are, Nathan.
So in addition to sort of doubling down on Cammie's request or question about making sure we have some financial analysis or some expert that can speak to sort of the local and city implications of various proposals, is there a way for either someone in staff or someone locally who could provide additional insight into what some of our neighboring cities are considering and the status of similar rules and ordinances? I mean, as much as I think we can easily identify our favorite city in the South Bay for the folks on this call, clearly the implications of what we do here have ramifications elsewhere. I suspect if theoretically we were to put new dispensaries on the border of Manhattan Beach and on the border of Redondo Beach, there would be considerations that they're taking in terms of where they're placing those as well. And so maybe just understanding kind of the regional implications and the state of play for our neighboring cities would be helpful, at least for someone like me who only cares about our little hamlet here in Hermosa.
Absolutely, we will definitely do that. And being the hamlet that we are, I think it's helpful to know what's happening around us. And so we'll do that. And that is moving along and evolving as well. Just very quickly, I think all our beach cities have had this initiative, pretty much very similar, if not identical initiatives in their city. And so everyone's a little bit on a different timeline. However, so far it seems as though Hermosa's would be the first one to go on the ballot if it does pass. So we'll have a proper update on that as well for the group. We'll do that. Thank you. I think Russ may have been up. Andrea, Russ?
Oh, sure.
I was just curious if before the ordinance was submitted, if any discussion or research or metrics had been collected that might come into play, if this was on anybody's radar prior to this initiative.
So prior to the initiative being formally submitted to the city clerk, or before the intent to gather signatures was formally submitted, we'd been hearing that there were initiative backers circulating, or circling, I should say, the South Bay. And so, that's it wasn't something that we could confirm. So that's really the only time. And then the representatives from the initiative backers had met with me and a couple of staff members, letting us know that they intended to drop an initiative in our city. And that was several months before. That was the first time we had actually heard from anybody, only time I should say. From a staff standpoint, that was the only time we heard from them, and there was no communication afterward. But no one requested, I think if I understand your question correctly, no one requested from the city any data, but they knew what the city's current ban was or is, and they knew what, in terms of buffer zones and all of that, when they created that, it seemed as though they were looking at what our current ban states. Of course, we have a citywide ban, but from the land use standpoint, they seem to have done their homework, but that was without any consultation with city staff.
But if they hadn't submitted, there was nothing underway already to talk about the ban or anything like that?
No, from a city standpoint, no, there wasn't. There wasn't. Yeah, this definitely is a triggering event. There wasn't anything else that was lining up. Okay, and Andrea.
Did I read that the Redondo initiative petitions was successful and that it's going on the ballot, or well, that they got enough, they've they think they have enough signatures?
I believe what we read is that they have submitted their signatures and it needs to go to county for verification. And so I don't know that we have a final determination on that. We may, and we'll find that out for you and we'll share that information.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Tom?
Wanted to offer the Beach Cities Health District as a resource. We do have survey information. We did serve on the task force that Redondo Beach used about a year ago, and we have a clear position on this issue. And so we do have information. We could also assist with perhaps somebody at LA County Department of Public Health who could come in and provide some medical expertise as well. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Cami?
I have I think it's a city question. How does this impact, or how are landlords involved? Because obviously they don't own the building. So I'm just wondering the many things they're going to need to come to code. Let's say, who is the cannabis people coming in going to have these air conditioning, have all the stuff that's going to be required because they're not currently sort of cannabis buildings. Like a restaurant has to go into a restaurant, and most things have to go into their proper zoning. So kind of like, what zoning code does this fall under, and then who has to make this happen?
Sure, absolutely. And if I can call on Ken, if he's available to join us. And let's see. Here you are.
Yes.
So you heard the question, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the initiative actually changes our zoning code, so we would have to follow the terms of the initiative. That's what the question relates to, and I don't have experience with it, but similar to the health department, the state has a Department of Cannabis Control that, whether it's a lessee or a property owner, business owner combination, they would have to comply with all the requirements of the State Department of Cannabis Control in terms of, again, regulations. I have to say I'm not that familiar with, but they're kind of similar in that role that the LA County Health Department is for restaurants, or ABC is for alcohol serving establishments.
How good are they at coming out and checking all these requirements? Because now all of a sudden it's not a city keeping up, it's a large body. I don't know, just curious how,
so I think,
is there enough people to check all of this? I mean, the ATF, we always hear oh yeah, we don't even have a head guy currently with ATF, right? I mean, nationally, there's not even a head person. So I guess have you found the state/county really on top of all of this?
So we don't have practical experience with this playing out just from our own city. We do have Chief LeBaron, for instance, who will discuss next time what his experience has been. And I believe retail operations may have started by the time Chief was transitioning from Long Beach to here, but we'll also be able to ask that question of the cannabis industry person who I find to be very balanced and would share that. But just from regionally, none of our cities has retail operations just yet, so we haven't seen it in practice. But I think we can get some information from certainly cities that have experience and folks that have the cannabis profession background. One of our committee members, Matt, whose birthday it was, who is not able to join us today, but he had stated he's not operating in California, so his experience, for instance, would be out of state. So we'll try to help answer that question for you, but that is a concern when something new is operating and we don't know, for instance, how much support we have. Okay. I think if that is it, I wanted to thank everyone for dedicating the time this afternoon, this evening, and thank you for your questions, your comments, your participation, and we'll get some materials out as soon as possible. And if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. We can add that to the list of questions we get answered and provide everyone the answer. Heidi?
I'm sorry, can I just throw one thing in regarding regulators and regulation? I mean, we're in a time right now in California where the cannabis business is saying not only do they want to roll back on taxes, but they want to roll back on regulations. And they want to remove local control as well. So, I mean, we're in kind of, California has had such a tough time. And so we're at, the business itself is evolving. And so when we talk about regulators, I think that it's going to be hard for us to say for certain what's going to happen, but I think there will probably be, it sounds like they're fighting for less regulation. So just want everybody to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you. All right, folks, I think you gained a half hour in your life back, so I appreciate that. And do feel free to let us know if there are any other aspects of this you'd like covered. But we have noted the taxation and the financial analysis component of the taxation, as well as what the status is of these initiatives in our cities, or even beyond the initiative ones, if any of our regional area cities in the South Bay may have something in place already, we will get that update to you. Okay, thank you.
I think that'd be great, Suja, because as much as we can say, you know, we all love Hermosa, we're extremely tied in with Manhattan and Redondo, and families and the schools are, you know, overlap, and the sports overlap, and the purchasing power overlaps. And so I think having just where are they at and what are they, you know, it will just help with information for everybody to hear, because they may hear other info that we haven't heard yet, or who's, you know, since we're all at different stages, that's actually could be helpful.
Agreed. All right. Thank you. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.